Hello, everyone. I'm Rob Hislop, your host here on ICANN Media. We are in Banff at the Petroleum Safety Conference. Joining us right now, the first speaker, basically, of the second day. It's Jim Donihee, and you're with CEPA, Canadian Energy Pipeline Association. Thanks very much for joining us today.
No, it's my pleasure. It's correct. CEPA, yeah.
So, with pipelines, we start off with that. That seems to be one of the, I guess, the dividing rods when it comes to the oil industry. A lot of people seem to focus on that. Is it a difficult time for you to be in that industry?
I think there are challenges undoubtedly, but the reality of everything that's going on too is it's an extremely exciting time in terms of being in the industry. So there's a lot of discussion about the challenges that we're facing in terms of building new infrastructure. Is it really? Is it really about pipelines? Is it pipelines the issue? Is it just the societal change that's undergone that we're experiencing now in terms of climate change and things of that nature? Is it really about us? Is it that pipelines are a convenient way in order to halt the development of the oil sands and so on? But for that reason, it's really important that we get it right from the viewpoint of performance, that we get it right from safety, and that we're completely transparent with Canadians in terms of the work that we're doing, which is really very good work.
One of the things that I hear when you listen to industry people talk, and that is, when it comes to pipelines, they're almost infallible. We're talking such a tremendous success rate as far as getting the product to the end result. That doesn't seem to matter these days to many of your critics, does it?
Well, I think they raise a very valid point too, and we're proud of our operating record, as we should be. When you quote performance standards like 99.995% reliability, it's exceptional. And yet when we speak with people that live and work in those communities, and they say, yeah, but what about that 0005? If that's going to spill in my backyard, I don't want it, obviously. And so that's why we don't want it either. We're working incredibly hard to make sure that never occurs, and that should it ever occur, that we've got all the response mechanisms in place, and that we help people recover as rapidly as possible.
So what sort of plans are in the work then for CEPA to try and get the word out? Because I've heard for a number of years, transparency is important. It's important that the industry is open. But, I've been more into it in the last 5 years, and I'm still hearing those same lines, yet the opposition is still there, and I don't know that it's even lessened if it has.
Yeah, I think. I'm going to suggest that it is lessened, and I think a lot of that is by virtue of the work that we've done over the last 2 or 3 years in terms of our own board. The CEOs of the 12-member companies of CEPA have been adamant that we're not interested in putting together glossies that we're going to try and convince people that go ahead and trust us because here's a pretty picture. The reality is we have to up our game in terms of performance, and that's really the focus of the work that we've been doing. And it is a true story in terms of the improvements that have been made on performance. And then, once you've got a credible story to tell, now let's get better at telling that story. And so, a very strong focus on social media, a very strong focus on getting into these smaller communities. Taking off your jacket and looking people in the eye and demonstrating to them that this is what we're doing. This is the actions we're taking. Yes, there are some challenges like there are in any industry, but here are the many programs and activities that we're putting in place to address those concerns. And by the way, I'm not here for 15 minutes. My name is Jim. I'll look you in the eye. Here's my number, and my commitment to you is that we're going to make this better. And I'd love to talk with you any day, at any time, about what your concerns are.
Tell us a little bit about your Integrity First program.
So the when Integrity First program is really an endeavor, if you will. It's how do you change an industry? How do you move an industry forward? And so how do you put a continuous improvement cycle over top of an entire industry in terms of moving forward? And so essentially it's based on management systems, highfalutin word to say, how do we bring people together to make sure that we can draw the very best of their knowledge? How do we then take a look at, every aspect of our business within, the context of the best of that knowledge and evaluate it? We are self-evaluating ourselves in each one of those areas, and rightly, most people would say, look, pin a blue ribbon on yourself, that's not good enough for me. And so to the next step, which we're introducing this summer, is to bring independent third parties, local citizens, others, in to take a look at these evaluations and make sure that, you know what, there is meat on these bones in terms of what we're doing and where we're going. And so it's really about making sure, how do we get the right systems in place to correct things before they happen. And at the same time, we're making sure that we're working very, very hard on the detection and the response in that unlikely event that something ever does happen.
Well, and that was one of the things I found interesting with your speech, is you were saying you want the public to be aware of the industry, warts and all, and that when something like Kalamazoo happens where there's a huge spill, you don't know that you should be forgiven for that, but you want to try and make amends and convince people that you are trying harder.
Absolutely. I mean, there's, you know, I think it's a pretty weak form of leadership to ever try and ask for forgiveness for something that could have been prevented if you were really working as hard and diligently as you should be in order to preclude it from ever happening. And so, you know, how do we learn from those, you know, those occurrences? They are extremely rare, thankfully, and hopefully to become even rarer over time. But how do we learn from those instances? How do we make sure that we're putting the right measures and practices in place to preclude those incidents from ever happening again? And how do we move forward? How do we learn? And there are humans in the system. We are imperfect beings. We're doing everything in our power to be as perfect as we can in this industry, and that's what it's all about. Learn, get better, move forward.
And you mentioned that on your website, you've actually got a document there that shows some of the issues with the industry that you're trying to address, and you've got an update to that. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'd be pleased to. So in 2015, CEPA put out its first ever performance report on the state of the industry. Specifically focused on our 12 members. What are the statistics? What are the rate of incidents? What are the kinds of problems that we're having? What are the measures that we're putting in place? It very clearly demonstrates the commitment of the 12 CEOs of the association to moving forward, and their full engagement and commitment to the pieces that we're putting in place. And so that report, which you can find on our website at allaboutpipelines.com, which I'd encourage all to take a peek at, speaks very openly about the areas that we're working hard at still improving. And I think, in true Canadian fashion, the thing that is neat about it is that we are, as a nation, probably the best pipeliners in the world. And as I say, in true Canadian fashion, we recognize that's not good enough yet, and we're working hard at getting better.
And you mentioned the one that you've got, but you've also got one coming out later this year that will update that 2015 report.
We do. In fact, in that first report, we made commitments to Canadians in terms of where we're going and what we're doing. That report came out in early November of 2015. In roughly mid-June of this year, the sequel to that report comes out, the progress report, we're calling it now, in order to demonstrate how are we doing against the commitments that we made, so that we can be held accountable for the commitments that we've made to industry, to Canadians, and to our nation in terms of moving forward.
So, Jim, thanks very much for your time.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
We've been chatting with Jim Donihee from CEPA here on ICANN Media.